So you heard from some amazing speakers, primarily talking about a few key points, I think. One is that only a small group of people cause trouble, whereas a vast majority of young people choose not to. That silent majority's voices need to be amplified. We need to focus on prevention just as much as we want to focus on disengagement. We need to focus on improving state responses on countering violent extremism as well. So we wanted to open this time out now. We have a little bit of time left. We started a little late, but we're going to try to end on time. And I wanted to open the floor out to see from you, to take some questions, and I'll ask the panelists to kind of respond to them. So raise your hand and very briefly introduce yourself and ask a question, or even if you have make a comment as well. And there's a lady with the mic who will come to you. There you go.
Hi, my name is Emily Bruchon. I'm a public affairs officer at the American Embassy here in Oslo. And I have a government perspective, and so I have a bit of a policy question following on something specifically that Laila Bokhari mentioned, although others are welcome to comment as well. But I'm thinking specifically about the challenge of foreign fighters, and wondered if, Laila, you could expand a little more on the comment that you made about the difficulty in finding balance between criminalizing violent extremism and leaving a pathway open for de-radicalization and integration or reintegration into society, so that youth who may have at least temporarily embraced violent extremism can have a viable future. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more question from the audience. There's one back here, Lisa.
Good morning, and thank you for really, really interesting speeches. I think one thing that really blows my mind is that 90,000 tweets from ISIL, and I think maybe we all need to figure out some kind of social media campaign, to try to counter that. But one thing, oh yeah, Lisa Cooper, Leadership Foundation, did forget to introduce myself, that I've been a little irritated with when it comes to counting violent extremism is not only the word, but it seems to be very event-based, yeah? You have a dialogue meeting, or you have a workshop, and then we think the problem is solved. But I think where I see some of a greater need is maybe going into the schools. How do we help teachers recognize this, see this? What kind of skills can we build at a very early stage so that we have sort of in the schools, with the parents, in the community, so that it is truthfully more of a holistic approach? It could be done. I don't work with this daily, so I'm not saying it like I'm a rocket scientist. It's just that what I see on my side are much more event-based, as opposed to things that I feel could truthfully have a long-term social impact. So I was just interested in hearing more about those type of initiatives.
Fantastic. I'll come back to Laila, and then also ask to respond to Lisa's question as well.
Sure. I'd like to start with Lisa's question, if I may, because I think you're touching on something which is essential. Countering violent extremism work is not a one-off, on and off. You don't switch it on and switch it off. And I'm sorry if it sounded like this. I think prevention is really about what we do every single day. As I said, what language we use, what rhetorics, how we teach our children and youth tolerance, or how we behave towards each other. That's, to me, countering, or rather forwarding, promoting a community that we'd like to be a part of. Now, we know that that's the major sort of prevention work. And then we know that there are certain, and we also know that youth may be attracted to different kinds of criminal gangs or different things. So it's countering violent extremism cannot be seen isolated. But there are instances where you see people who have been pulled into, or are really on the verge of being pulled into certain environments. And then you need to go into more targeted conversations, dialogues, or others. So you need to think several things at the same time, and think really broad prevention work in school. I mean, one of the things which I think we need to become better at is teaching, yes, teachers, well, a lot of them do what they do and have done through ages, teaching young children on how do we work together, how do we promote multiculturalism, if that is something, but not only multiculturalism, but being citizens towards each other. But also, how do we, in a more challenging environment where you get messages, as was said here, how do we counter these? We see a development, for instance, of more severe hate speech, which we know may lead to violent extremism of different sorts, of different kinds. So to engage in those kind of direct conversations, but at the same time, making sure we have the ground that hopefully will not lead to those actions. And this comes within, teachers, schools, religious communities, just different, how journalists speak about our societies, how politicians speak about the challenges that we face. So all of these things I think are important. Emily, one of the challenges, as I mentioned, in the issue of foreign fighters, is one thing is the issue of how preventing people from traveling. Another thing is when they come back and return. Now we know that a number of people are returning. We're still at the very beginning of this development. It's something that European countries and others are grappling with all the time. What do you do when you have someone returning to our home communities? And of course it depends on what kind of environment they've been exposed to. We don't know this, how affected have they been? Can they become part of our society? Can they become part of our normal society again? Do we have to put them into prison? Is there criminalizing? What are the tools in this? Now, I think that the main goal has to be, and that's my belief in humanity, that whatever you've done, you should have a chance of being reintegrated into society. Now, some people say that the best thing is to isolate them in prison, not isolate them in prison from normal society, but isolate them from people who will make them further heroes because they've been to places and fought, which might make them heroes in certain environments. And that's why engaging them in positive circles can be more efficient. This is something which we're all grappling with and trying to find out. What are the tools, what are the exit programs, as we call them, to get people onto the right track. We have a number of examples of people who used to work against right-wing extremism, neo-Nazi programs, etc., exit programs, and looking at what was done in the 80s, 90s in Norway in local communities, and now seeing how can we use this again. Very different context. But at the same time, the main aim was, how do you engage people back into society? That's just some of the points.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wants to talk?
I want to just take up, I think, your comment. I think, prevention is extremely important, but we also have to not dismiss the concerns of young people. I mean, if you're looking at extremist recruitment from kind of the West in general and in the US, and you have increased trends of people from Europe and that, young people, oftentimes when they're asked, what is your biggest gripe? It's that I don't have a voice in foreign policy. My foreign policy of my country that I'm currently living counters and goes against my own values as a person. I think we have to really target, you brought up media. When you turn on the media, I'm speaking from a personal perspective now, when I turn on the media and I hear coverage of anchors that are supposed to represent me, right, in my country, for example, in the United States, I would hate Arabs and Muslims if I didn't know better. I think in general we need to do much better at, as communities, speaking out against hate, and not just hate in a marginalized way, but actually having forums where there is, for lack of better phrasing, but public shaming of people that think it's okay And let's be very, very honest. I mean, Islamophobia in the United States is an entire business. It's an industry. It is earning a lot of money. There's an entire infrastructure behind it. We need to be better at attacking and battling these ideologies that do allow people to feel increasingly more marginalized. I think it comes down to prevention and education. I mean, when we look at just the outcomes of people that are impacted, and you're looking at how do we resolve the issue of these young people that are violent or extreme, and not looking at the causes and the reasons that may have led them to become that way, we're actually doing a disservice in addressing the issue, and we're not going to necessarily cut the cycle, the vicious cycle of recruiting more. It's this perpetual problem that keeps happening, and we need to really assess the policy implementations, the business models behind it, and look more holistically at education systems that do enable and allow bullying. In a lot of Europe, very sadly, I went to a European school system in England, and there was a lot of bullying for anybody that was other, and there needs to be more approaches within schools to teach tolerance and respect and empathy towards anybody that's perceived to be different. I think we need to, not to overlook that as a solution also.
So not just on math and sciences and technology, but also being a whole person and being a moral, a person who can battle for this humanity we're talking about.